Joined here tonight with two remarkable higher education leaders, Jonathan Holloway, who's the president of Rutgers University, which serves over 70,000 students, and the former provost of Northwestern, and Rick Levin, who was the president of Yale for over 20 years, and then the CEO of Coursera, and I was lucky enough to work under him at Coursera, and so thank you both for being here this evening. So these are tumultuous times in higher education, to say the least. But let's actually start with a topic that I think a lot about, which is AI. So it's been less than a year since ChatGPT launched. It launched in November of last year. And I'm going to read a quote from Sundar, the CEO of Google. He said, "AI is one of the most important things humanity is working on. It's more profound than, I don't know, electricity or fire." So I'm going to start with Jonathan. What are you seeing on your campus? What do you think about higher education and AI?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. I will also point out that Rick is both of our bosses at some point when I was on the faculty and dean of Yale College. But I mean, first of all, electricity and fire, I mean, you need electricity to get AI to do anything, so there's some priorities there. But you know, it's a radically destabilizing event, and one of the biggest challenges we face in higher education is that we are slow adopters. We're just massive super vessels, take a long time to change, and we have seen change happening at a pace I've never encountered in my lifetime. And it interacts with the research opportunities, academic integrity, absolutely, and pedagogical opportunities. I'll just call them opportunities, because we don't know which way this is going to go. And I know Rick can attest to this, is that faculty are challenging in so many different ways. And so you'll have a faculty of people who can't wait to adopt AI and do all these things with it. And you have faculty who will be over their dead body. Probably somewhere in the middle is the right place to be, but you know, you may think presidents have the authority to do things when it comes to the faculty. Well, I'm still a new president. I don't, maybe there's a way, maybe Rick can help me with that, but it's really hard to get to move this population, especially when the change is hyper constant.
I certainly agree with you about faculty, you know, marching to their own drummer. I just am reminded that a very good friend of mine, who was a professor in the Yale Law School, started using email in 2017. So, and for 20 years I could not get my administrative assistant to switch to an electronic calendar. She used a physical red book. So that's true. But I actually think there's AI, I think it's pretty obvious, I think, to people in this room who are pretty savvy, that it presents some challenges and some tremendous opportunities for higher education. The challenges are mostly, I think, mostly short-term, because it's problems that I think can be solved by technology, such as you know, preserving academic integrity. I think everybody's nervous about that. Professors are nervous about that, and to the point that some people are actually returning to the physical blue book in the classroom with proctoring as the way of actually assessing students' performance. And it's not unwise, but there, you know, at places like Coursera, and I'm sure a number of the other companies represented here, we're actually working on solutions, on ways of doing, I'm not going to give away any trade secrets, but on ways of doing effective proctoring that either restricts the amount of access to AI, to you know, AI LLMs, or shuts it off completely. So I think we'll solve that. But it is a short-term problem of some significance, and it threatens, of course, the value of the micro-credentials as well as the online degrees and so forth that we're offering. And in fact, on the for the physical presence, physical campus degrees as well. So that'll be solved. The exciting part is how is AI going to be used as a tool for learning and as a tool to advance research? And we see this happening all over, just mushrooming. People using the chat boxes to get, to do summaries, to help them study, to master material more quickly. In a way, it's just an iteration on what happened when Google search, became popular. People could find information much faster. I mean, some of us grew up in days when you actually had to go to the encyclopedia, physical volumes, pull them off the shelf and look up answers to things. So we're just one more iteration there. And by the way, just since you mentioned Sundar's quote, I think he's completely wrong. I mean, I think the internet was a more profound invention than AI. AI's, so far at least. I mean, when the machines actually take over, maybe he's right. But before that, I think it's just another tool.
So I want to dive into the pace of change a little. So last week I was invited to join a curriculum committee at a top university, and they were interested in the work that we were doing on AI in education. And when I told them that we were updating our classes about every 3 months or so, I saw the blood drain out of the faculty's face, and they looked at me with horror. Can you talk a little bit about this tension between wanting to provide students with the skills that they need for the job market, which are increasingly dynamic, with wanting to create something that's more enduring, that's going to last a lifetime?
One of the things that is always important, well, first of all, updating the course every 3 months, I would have been that faculty member who'd gone ashen, having teaching my history lecture course for 15, 18 years. One of the things that's always to keep front of mind is that when we think about higher education, we often think in shorthand. There is a model. And often it is driven by the Ivies, and Ivy Plus, Stanford, MIT, the Ivies, that is the model that defines higher ed. But that's a tiny percentage of the actual user base in higher ed. I'm not going to diminish the importance. I was raised in these environments. But when we think about higher ed, community college higher ed, that's most people. I'm now at a massive public institution, which presents different kinds of pedagogical challenges, opportunities, needs, et cetera. So a lot of my students, if I'm to overgeneralize for Rutgers, we have a massive number of first-generation students who English is often not the first language at home, and lower resource. And so it is very rational to say we need to build a curriculum that will land that person a job, a decent job, within a year or two of graduation. The challenge, of course, is that things are moving so quickly, we don't know what jobs are going to be there in 5 years, is one real challenge. That are beyond sort of what I'll call even high-end menial things. So that's a challenge at a large public like mine. Still a Research One university, still elite in many kinds of ways, but there's a huge part of my student population that are actually very pragmatic because they need to contribute to the family coffer to keep the roof over their head. And places, the elite privates are getting more and more of the students in the door, but it is a very different dynamic, and something I didn't appreciate until I got to Rutgers, to be quite honest. So that's something I just want to add into that whole mix. So there's a tension there. I have never been at a school until Rutgers now that has criminology as part of the program, and we are training undergraduates to become police officers. That is not part of my tradition, but that's an important part of the whole ecosystem in higher ed. So we can't dismiss that, basically is what I'm trying to say. Well, I'll stop there.
Well, I basically agree with you, Jonathan. I think that we need to understand something about the history of how we got here. So in the late 19th century, the United States was the first country in the world to have a requirement of universal high school education. And that conferred enormous advantages on the United States because we had a literate labor force. And as we hit the second industrial revolution, and that literate labor force was the most productive in the world by far. So the idea of universal education and a kind of equality of opportunity and treatment was a driver that conditioned what happened in 1945. Prior to 1945, only 10% of the age cohort in the United States went to university. And after 1945, that number, as you know, jumped to 50 and then 70% over a pretty short historical time period. And I think part of the problem was we adopted this model of universality, more or less, at least for four-year institutions. Everybody wanted to teach what universities had been doing up till then. But the universities up till then were, by and large, the elites, much smaller state systems. They were not educating for vocation, by and large. They were educating to teach people critical skills, how to read, how to think, how to interact, how to write. And they were educating people broadly for citizenship, and then specialization for that elite category, that 10%, was going to be in graduate schools that specialized into different professions. That was a great model for that group. All of a sudden, it became the model for half the population, and it may not have been the right decision. That is to say, everywhere else in Europe, for example, and the developed parts of Asia, you have a vocational education system, much of which is very high quality in many places, Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, Singapore. These put our community colleges to shame because they're not confused about what they're doing. They don't think they're stepping stones to university as our community colleges do. Community colleges believe they're stepping stones, and only 7% of entrants in community colleges ever get a college degree. So I think we really need a serious rethink about vocational education. And for the schools that are, like Yale and Harvard and Stanford, they don't need to worry about this. They don't need to train for vocations because they can continue to give a kind of classical education that trains people for leadership, because 85 to 90% of our graduates go on to do graduate work and get specialized later. So the key is more thinking about vocational education and doing it in a much more progressive and 21st century way.
And if I could add, I think you're completely right. And if I could add to that, one of the challenges we're facing at Rutgers is retention. Very different challenge in Yale or Stanford or whatnot. But retention, because the vocational aspect, there are job opportunities in Amazon warehouse. That's 10 minutes away. That's paying $20 an hour. And it makes abundant sense for the next 3 years. And then it doesn't make sense. But trying to tell somebody who needs to help out mom and dad that does, you need to delay your gratification. Really, you're not going to see a return on that for maybe 10 years. But then it'll be great. Try telling a 19-year-old that.
So 3.5 years ago, all of higher education moved online. And I think many in EdTech thought this was the moment that higher education was going to really change, that there was going to be new modalities that potentially could be more flexible, that could allow students to work and study, and has that happened? And
Same answer is your first question, right?
I'll start with you, Jonathan.
Are we always starting with me? Is this the thing?
That was part. Rick actually requested that in our prep.
No, it really, I don't want to be a broken record saying it depends. I mean, it depends on what model you're on higher ed. It also depends on the culture of your institution and how its ability to be nimble. Not a word I'd ever associate with higher ed in general. There are different types of online learning opportunities. I mean, Rick has written about this, so I'm not going to go into, but, massive open online courses, and there's a whole evolution since then. But right now in this moment is how to take advantage of what did we learn 2 and 3 years ago, and can we stick to it? The best parts. Because a lot of things we did, if anybody told anyone in this room that higher ed could pivot in 2 weeks, no one would have believed them 3.5 years ago. And we did a pretty decent job given everything, right? But I worry about backsliding into old practices, certainly in my institution. And if we don't speaking now for Rutgers, if we don't take advantage of the lessons, the positive lessons we learned, And for us, develop new markets, say facing Philadelphia and facing New York, two of our schools are right close to them. If we don't beam ourselves into those markets, try to capture whether it's going to be stackable degrees, whether it's going, really focusing on those parts of higher ed that lend themselves well to it, like business or different engineering programs, then we've really missed an incredible opportunity, a pedagogical opportunity, research opportunity, and let's face it, a revenue opportunity. And then there's a whole population that, for me, I just didn't know about this, I'll confess, is a lot of our online learners are lifelong learners, and that they are 45 years old. They're not looking for a degree necessarily, but they're looking for continual learning opportunities. And that's an incredible opportunity, especially as the State University of New Jersey. I think we actually should, it is our responsibility to create opportunities in the online space for lifelong learners. But we're fighting some uphill battles at our institution, just in trying to get to that place. And part of it is about, I will not go into the weeds here, but equity in terms of what a teaching job in this space looks like versus a teaching job of students in the classroom. That's just one, we can go on, but that's an example of how it gets very complicated very quickly.
I agree that what happened in 2020 had an impact on universities. And from an ed tech perspective, wearing my Coursera hat, the biggest impact was it got many faculty over their fears of that this is just a terrible thing and it's going to destroy us. So I think it was very helpful in that respect from an ed tech perspective. What higher education missed, though, I think, was because it was really educating its own students. What higher ed did in 2020, 2021 was sort of similar to what happened in the early history of motion pictures, where you just filmed stage plays on a proscenium. So the universities were just replicating the classroom online, and it did work pretty well, especially in seminar classes, I think. But they missed the two key features. I mean, if you ask an ed tech person what's important about ed tech, what is it doing? One is it's reaching enormous numbers of people, so it's scalable. And of course, that wasn't part of the agenda. And I think universities are still slow to appreciate the importance of scalability. And scalability has the feature, the second point, of lowering cost per student. And so I think in the long run, universities are going to end up in the business of providing much more content for global consumption, extend the reach of its professorate, and earn some revenue to support its operations.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it will be truly interesting. And here I'm speaking as a historian, as a humanist, and I serve on a tech company board. I'm the resident Luddite in that regard. But trying to anticipate what is going to be valued in this kind of learning environment in 10 years is an interesting kind of challenge. I'm a historian. I'm old-fashioned in so many ways, not afraid of adopting technology, but wanting to ask old and timeless questions, deeply humanistic kinds of questions. And will that operate in the same way? I mean, I'm actually wonder, will it operate will it still be valued in the same way in an online platform with a strong vocational element to it, which I think we need, especially for scalability. But I would hate to see, and this is not self-serving, but I really would hate to see the humanistic foundation of universities being priced out because they're too expensive, because they can't scale in the same way that a class in engineering opportunity, that you're training people at large scale for great new job opportunities where you can get jobs right away. There is a transactional difference there. And so I don't want to lose sight of this grand old tradition that makes universities very special places, while also being honest, is that we need to serve greater numbers of people and in jobs that, in ways that they can get jobs very quickly.
So I want to switch gears a little bit and make sure we're able to touch on this topic, which actually gets at the foundation of universities. This is a time of extreme political polarization, where there's an immense distrust for institutions, and the last few weeks I think have been particularly challenging. What is the obligation of higher education leadership during this environment?
Okay. Well, I'm going to run against the grain of current thinking on this one. I think we've gotten ourselves into an unfortunate situation where various publics, parents, alumni, students, not so much faculty, but parents, alumni, and students primarily, seem to expect now that the university is going to be a public moral voice, or that is to say, the university's leader is going to be a public moral voice on any important issue that comes to public attention. And I think this is fundamentally wrong, and it rests on a fundamentally wrong conception of what the university is. The university is an environment in which free and open discussion is paramount. It's paramount because it's essential to really deep learning on the part of students. It's essential to the freedom of faculty to pursue whatever interests they may have and make new discoveries, new findings, new interpretations that help to change our understanding of the world and of nature. So we need to preserve that internal freedom, and to do that, you need to preserve free and open discussion. Now, this is a separate matter, but free and open discussion at many universities today is somewhat in question, in that there are, because of the polarization in our society, there are prevailing orthodoxies that make it, in some institutions, very uncomfortable for students to speak out about certain views they might hold. And the only way we're going to get past our divisions is by talking about our differences, coming together in open and free discussion. The university is the perfect forum for doing that. So if you start to ask the head of the university to make public statements about this or that current event, you are staking out some ground that's going to make some people more comfortable than others, and not make it as easy and free a discussion environment. I don't see the value of it. I mean, there was a classic report on this subject in 1967 called the Calvin Report that articulates, I think, very beautifully the principles that I've just tried to, feebly articulate here, which I believe should govern these situations. Now, we've got ourselves into this box where it's now kind of expected, and you can see many university presidents are struggling right now because they didn't say enough, at least in the eyes of some, and now they're saying more, and people are making a second and a third statement. It's very sad, actually, and I hope other universities will follow, as the University of Chicago has consistently since 1967, just pull back and say, this isn't our role. We're training you, students of tomorrow, to speak for yourself. We don't have to speak for you.
Yes. That wasn't a feeble articulation at all. I completely agree with you, and I agree with you. But let me offer sort of the pushback that people, because I certainly have received a little bit of pushback, yeah. But as universities have become more diverse, and I want to make clear, I'm not couching this as a problem of becoming more diverse, but a challenge. As they become more diverse on socioeconomic lines, experiential lines, language, background, race, you name it, what had been for a very long time a rather homogeneous population. This is actually why Chicago did this work, because of all the tumult in the 60s that turned into the Calvin Report. It has become increasingly difficult, as universities have increasingly been trying to serve a broader population, to find ways to thread the needle between, and I'll oversimplify it. These are the things you must know. Timeless old ideas, the best ideas known to humankind. We hold this up like a beautiful orb, and bring in people whose job is to say, that's wrong. We have to do both. And that's actually really a healthy thing. And that's why we need that open spirit of free inquiry and pushing back and forth. But the dynamics have become so bizarre. And we've certainly seen it, I'm representing the public university sector. I'm very fortunate to have an amazing board, but I'm a very rare specimen in saying that. We've seen the politicization of boards by elected officials or by corporate interest or what have you, that make it harder and harder to take the principled stand that Rick is talking about. Because if their job is to protect the university, they need to stay in the role. But if they protect the university, that governor is saying, I'm going to populate your board with people who want you fired. And that's not a made-up thing. I'm thinking of two of my colleagues who are living that right now. So it's become difficult in three different dimensions. And I do believe deeply that we should be taking principled stands about the value of inquiry, free inquiry, wrestling with really hard ideas. It's the only way to get a better idea. Absolutely. But these last 2 weeks have unveiled to me the difficulty of that terrain now in ways I've just not seen before. And I don't know how we get out of this box that we put ourselves in. I mean, I just don't, to be quite honest. So it's a concern.
So I want to end on a note of optimism, and this is actually something that I loved about working for you, Rick, is that there were so many ups and downs at Coursera, but you always brought the company back to the opportunity and the possibilities and the mission. And so what makes you optimistic about higher education today?
I think that the thing that makes me optimistic is universities are the oldest surviving institutions in the Western world. And I think they'll get through this. That is, I mean, with all the challenges, I don't think AI will undo what universities do. I don't think these current political issues we have now will last forever. They'll be transient. In fact, you can see cycles in the 1930s and 1960s, a little bit of blip in the early 1990s, where there was a lot of unrest on campuses and things seemed out of control. And, the pendulum swung back. I'm not nervous about the future in the long run. I think that what universities contribute to society is so important, so valuable. I mean, the advancement of knowledge, the preservation of knowledge, and the dissemination of knowledge to the next generation. Those things are timeless and enduring and important, and we'll go on. It'll be okay.
I wish you should leave a voicemail in my phone every night so I can play it and feel better. I really hope you're right, Rick, so much. And you always, in your long tenure at Yale as president, you're known for being optimistic, just in tough moments, this is going to be fine. So I will use that as a model. This may sound a little bit like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but I am hopeful because I choose to be hopeful, and that's an active choice. This is the Mr. Smith moment. I have 30 reasons. I'm teaching a course called Citizenship Institutions in the Public because of my concern for all of these things. And I walk in every Wednesday heavy with the weight. I'm interviewing leaders of different sectors, of media, faith, politics, you name it. And I walk in every day heavy with, oh my God, we really got to talk through this thing. Thursday? Yeah, yesterday I was interviewing Mike Emanuel from the chief Washington correspondent for Fox News. Politically, we were in very different places, but I know from talking we share a lot of common ground. And that's the part that's missing, is that belief in the common ground. So I walk into that room feeling, how are we going to get through this with my 30 students? And I walk out and my feet are barely touching the ground. Because these are first year students who are all in. They're curious, they are precious in a very sincere way. They are asking all of my guests hard questions, but they're asking in a really respectful manner. Boy, we need more of that on our campuses. And the fact that we can find it and that these students will come to the conversation in a really earnest way gives me hope. And so that's what's getting me through this semester right now.
Thank you both very much.